Paul Heyman has one of wrestling's most brilliant minds and one of its most impossible personalities. He's spent his whole career rubbing people the wrong way, but every now and then, someone does the same to him. Back in 1992, Bill Watts was one of those people. Heyman was already a well-established character in WCW at the time. He was managing the Dangerous Alliance, doing commentary, and working behind the scenes too. Heyman was an important part of the promotion, that is, until Bill Watts showed up. Watts was brought in to run WCW as executive vice president, and he hated everything Heyman stood for. To him, Heyman was a loudmouth punk who got paid way too much and didn't respect the business. And according to multiple reports, he made it deeply personal. Heyman has said in interviews that he never experienced real anti-Semitism in wrestling until he worked under Bill Watts. Watts allegedly hurled anti-Semitic slurs at Heyman backstage, calling him a Jewer and referring to him and Medusa as the Jew and the C in front of other staff. But Heyman didn't just sit back and take it. During one backstage meeting, he reportedly brought in a printout of an old interview Watts had done with the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, where Watts defended racial segregation, arguing that private business owners should be allowed to refuse service to black customers. According to witnesses, Watts exploded in response and fired off another string of anti-Semitic slurs at Heyman, this time in front of the entire meeting room. Not long after, Heyman was fired. The official reason? Falsified expense reports. But according to Dave Meltzer, Heyman responded by filing a lawsuit against WCW for wrongful termination and ethnic discrimination. The case was reportedly settled out of court. By 1997, Heyman had transformed ECU into something special, a violent renegade alternative to WWF. That year, as part of a storyline between the two companies, ECW invaded Monday Night Raw. And right in the middle of it, you could feel the tension between Heyman and Jerry Lawler. And the hate between them, it wasn't just for TV, it was real. It went all the way back to the late 80s, when Heyman worked for Lawler in his Memphis territory. He was managing Austin Idol and Tommy Rich during their feud with Lawler, one of the biggest angles in Memphis at the time. The storyline had been built up for weeks. Heyman constantly got involved. The crowd was whipped into a frenzy, wanting to see him get his ass kicked. To pay the feud off, Lawler booked a scaffold match. The plan was for Heyman to climb up with him, either take a bump or beg for mercy in front of the crowd. But Heyman refused. He told Lawler he wasn't comfortable with heights and didn't want to risk it. So after all those weeks, the payoff never happened. Lawler said it completely killed the angle. He also claimed they got into a fight backstage over it, and that he was so angry, he punched Heyman. From that point on, their relationship was never the same. Years later, when ECW showed up on Raw, that tension came back. Lawler spent the entire show burying ECW on commentary, calling it garbage, mocking the wrestlers, and treating Heyman like a joke. But Heyman was right there at the desk, with him. And he fired right back, saying Lawler's style was outdated and calling him a relic from a dead era. During that storyline, ECW was at its peak, a real alternative WWF. It had a cult following of devoted fans. But just a few years later, the cracks started to show. Running a wrestling company at that level meant big expenses, and the money wasn't coming in fast enough. Heyman was a creative genius, but as a businessman, he was out of his depth. He struggled to pay his roster. Wrestlers started leaving. Raven, Shane Douglas, Taz, the Dudley Boys, even Mikey Whipwreck and the Sandman all left ECW for WWF. Even Tommy Dreamer, the most loyal guy in the company, was holding things together with hopes and prayers. By 2000, most of the locker room had lost faith in Heyman. And that's when Mike Awesome walked out too, while still the ECW World Champion. With no warning, he showed up on WCW Nitro. According to Awesome himself, his ECW contract had expired and he hadn't been paid in months. He refused to sign a new deal until Heyman paid him what he was owed. When that didn't happen, he went to WCW. You could argue that Awesome was just looking out for himself. And he was. But for Heyman, it didn't matter. The guy he trusted walked out with the world title during ECW's darkest hour. Heyman fired back, threatening legal action, claiming Awesome was still under contract. He demanded W take him off TV. But behind the scenes, WCW's legal team didn't take it seriously. According to Eric Bischoff, Heyman was bluffing. There wasn't a signed contract, just verbal agreements and handshakes.